What's going on, guys? Welcome to the David F. Haas podcast. I'm in the studio today with my good friend Natalie Morse. She's been on the podcast once or twice?
Once.
Okay, once before. She's a pharmacist and a functional medical medicine practitioner. Yeah, did I say that right? But Natalie and I have recently teamed up, and we've been doing some one-day retreats at Lungo Vita. She's also a part of my group on Tuesday nights, where we're kind of hosting that together. Got a lot of good stuff going on, and Natalie and I thought it would be really appropriate for us to get on a podcast and to kind of go a little bit deeper about spiritual growth. And spiritual growth is gotten so fluffy out there these days, and everyone's kind of into it. And one of the things that I've been kind of being called to do potentially for myself recently is to launch a course I'm thinking a course for men, and it would be spiritual growth without crystals and sound bowls and drum circles. Just the guts of it, but I think that stuff's okay. But I think it turns off a lot of men. Every time we do events out at Lungo Vita, it's 90% women, 10% men. But anyways, I'm getting off track. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. Good to be in the studio again.
Yeah, I'm happy. We got Zach in here now and doing some recording for us. It's gonna be really good stuff. So Natalie and I were at an event that our mentor Andrew hosted at Unity Spiritual Center. There's about 60 people there, and Andrew did via Zoom. He did a live healing session, and Natalie and I kind of just helped out, assisted with it. And now this is a lot of what I tell people that aren't really into this, this stuff. And I kind of catch myself getting a little bit annoyed by it, but I have to dig into why that's happening. But when people are asking me what is it that I'm up to, it's I can't even explain it. You can't explain what happened there at Unity Spiritual Center on Sunday. It's it was a transformation. So, but let me just frame this thing up. And so Andrew's on this big screen over Zoom, and there's 60 people in the audience, and Natalie and I are there, and we're doing a group healing, but we selected one person to come up on the table, and then Natalie and I were kind of working on this girl. Working on this girl means essentially we're just standing over her, might be putting our hands on her, and just connecting to her at a spiritual level. And there was several other people in the audience that were also receiving the treatment, but it was for everybody. And the energy that was flowing through that room was just wild. And the woman that got the treatment, I was kind of jealous of her, because she had 60 people, Andrew, myself, Natalie, and some more people came up also, just focusing their love and energy on her. And you could see it physically in her. She was having this physical release. And so I was at a family event after that, and they were oh, what were you doing out there? And I was I was just doing a talk. I don't even get into it, because you would have to be there to understand. And even for me to describe it like this, it doesn't kind of hit, but what happened was we connected to someone at a spiritual level. Well, actually the whole entire crew, because Andrew at the end said how many people benefited from this, and the whole entire room raised their hands. Right. And so everybody got something from it. And it's hard to explain what happened there, because it's nonlinear. It's outside of the day-to-day kind of things. And I don't know, maybe you can put a better explanation to it.
Well, the quantum entanglement, to try to explain what happened in 40 minutes, of everything that led to everyone being in the places that they were, whether it's the woman you mentioned who came up, and basically she was the representative of the entire group. And then we broke into a short 1-minute exercise at the end for everyone to be in the spaces that they were. It's it would spend a lifetime to put all the things together of what happened. So it is really hard to explain when people ask me, hey, what do you do? I'm well, or what do you got going on? Well, It is, because there's the term ineffable, which means you can't explain it. You can't put words when you experience the energy, the things I'm very visual, so I see things and we feel things, and the true connection and bond between people when you do see each other at a soul level, it is ineffable. So it's hard to explain what you feel what was happening, and then potentially what the outcome, what's the consequence, positive or negative, of something like that happening.
Yeah. And what Natalie and I were talking after, because the energy was like just so wild in the room, like I mean, every time I would place my hands on the girl on the table, she would like just have this like, she was just out of it. Like she was in the deepest meditation you could get, and her eyes are flickering like crazy. And I'm like, 90% of the people in this room have no idea what just happened. Right? But they felt it. They felt that there was a shift. They felt that there was movement. But I'm 100% certain that moment for several people in that room is going to be like a TSN turning point in their lives, because that's similar to like my story. And Andrew shared a similar story that happened to him as well. And this is kind of like what happens. But the thing that is funny about this work is that what happened there on Sunday, it was a spiritual healing treatment. That's what we're going to call it for the entire group. What happened there on Sunday, people may not realize the benefit of that until like 5 years from now, right? And then they're going to look back and they're going to go, holy shit, it was that time that I was at, then the guy was on the big screen, and like that was the moment I had the awareness that this, and so that's kind of like similar to my story. Was when Andrew was making the movie Voyage to Betterment, like I was kind of his guinea pig, and it was really based around food at that time. But then as he, started to learn more, he started to incorporate more of the spiritual side of things into it. And then I remember I had a scan from Lori Wilson, and that was kind of like my, I said this before the podcast, I was like, it was my aha moment, but it was also like my oh shit moment. Like, and the oh shit, and let me frame this up a little bit better. So Lori is a medical intuitive. You can contact her through now she's all digital, and back then you had to write her a letter, but now you can send her an email and saying, hey, my name's Dave, and I'm looking for you to do a scan and just tell me what's going on with my body. I am having, maybe you could say I'm having this problem or this problem, and she will connect to you, whatever that means. Right? And we know it's like at a spiritual level. She'll connect to you and she'll just go through your entire body, and she'll start picking up like what's going on, right? And she might be she might pick up on stiffness in the back. She might pick up on viruses that you might be holding on to, bacteria that your body's been unable to clear. Like she just gets like insanely specific. And so she wrote back then, I had just put my name in an envelope. We sent it off to Lori, and then she wrote out a 3-page scan, like typed it out, which is actually kind of wild now that I think about that. She did that for like 12 people. And I read this scan, and it was so pinpoint accurate to everything that had ever happened to me in my entire life. There was no way she could get the information that was on this sheet, right? And it was like, whoa, like we're all interconnected. And, but it was also like, whoa, somebody else knows all my shit. and so that's what it was like I said, so in that moment, while it was heavy and it was like, whoa, profound, it didn't really sink in to like what had actually happened there. But that moment there was the catalyst that completely, transformed my life, because then I slowly moved towards this awareness that I am not my body and I'm not my mind. I'm something greater than that. And from that place of greaterness of awareness, I am also connected to all, right? So then at any time, I can get any answer that I want to any question. And also, if someone comes to me for help, I can also tap into that and tune into what's going on with them as well, right? And so that was like the moment where I was like, oh, but I didn't realize it for years after that was the moment. And I think that's what happened at Spiritual Unity Center. I think while people did experience insane shifts, and I think, like I said, I said there's probably at least 10 people whose lives will never be the same after that treatment, right? And I've experienced this thousands of times doing spiritual treatments on people. And there's still this element sometimes of doubt in me, although it is starting to go away. Like I am almost at a point now where if someone gets on my table or someone comes into a one-on-one coaching, or if I'm doing a group coaching, I just trust that whatever needs to come up is going to come up, and it's going to go exactly the way it's supposed to go. So I'm getting more confirmation, but I'm just curious if you ever had like experiences like that, or those moments of like, whoa, like what I thought I knew was nowhere near what I actually knew.
There's definitely been a few, and I would say a key one you were involved in.
Oh.
So it was my first treatment I received from Andrew, and you were there.
Oh, okay.
I'd met Andrew a few years before at an event, and in even the event he was speaking at that I was there, I didn't know who he was. I was going because one of the keynote speakers was an Olympian, At the time I was racing triathlons. I wanted to go hear from this Olympian. That's why I was even in the room. And of all the speakers that night, it was Andrew he explained some things. I was like, that was the one I resonated with. And again, looking back, that's why I need to be there. That was the person I needed to hear. I met Nebiana that night. I picked up the copy of Voyage to Betterment. So that was key. And a few years later, Andrew was offering treatments at his home. And I was starting to work one-on-one with clients in functional medicine, which the tenets of functional medicine is, what is the root of what's going on? We've got all the symptoms. Okay, what's actually underneath it? And one of my philosophies is I'll never recommend something to someone else if I haven't done it myself or I would not be willing to do it. So I'm like, all right, I was seeing what Andrew has done, been following him for a few years. I know he can help people. I'd been into some other workshops that he had done. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to refer people to go see him, I need to go experience it myself. So I went with that intention, I'm going to go, similarly, if I'm going to send someone to a massage therapist, it's usually a massage therapist I've been to. So I go for the treatment, you're there, I have the treatment, and it was like my head just got blown off. And again, in that moment, like I was unable to drive for about an hour after. Like I stayed at the house. He was at the lake, chilled at the lake, had some juice. I was unable to drive. It was a state of wonder and it was a state of awe. And I, to this day, really would not really be able to describe or even know what had transpired in that less than an hour. But that was a key moment for me of what was that? What just happened? I know Andrew said during the treatment, it's like, she's a teacher. And earlier that morning, I had given a workshop. But I knew, I could tell by his face, there was like, oh, no, there's way more here. Mm-hmm. But some of those key things that were brought up, again, I don't think I'd even talked to Andrew one-on-one at that point. Had definitely never met you.
Right.
Had seen you in the movie, Dave.
Yeah.
But I'd never met you in person.
Right.
So you didn't know me from anything. And the things that came up were so clear. And let's call it energy, just the state in my body I had felt nothing like that ever afterwards. So I would say like the first key pivotal moment of like, whoa, what is going on here? This is something that, I'm going to keep exploring. There was definitely things that revealed that were going to be important to me. And, again, that led us to sitting here chatting over a podcast.
Right. And all of the events that have unfolded from, being exposed to this work. And I think the important thing too is like, we're kind of, putting Andrew up on this pedestal and Andrew did this, but it's like Andrew even says himself, like there's nothing special about him. Like he was able to teach it to you and I, like relatively simply. And this is because at our core, who we really are is like a spiritual being, right? Having a human experience. And this is a word that's getting overused, but what we're doing, in my words, is like we're connecting to people at a soul level. And when you connect to people at a soul level, that's when like the greatest change happens, because the physical body is only responding to what's happening at like an emotional, mental, and a spiritual level. So if you're at a spiritual level of consciousness of like, let's say anger at 150, you are constantly going to be attracting things into your life that are going to make you angry. And if you're angry all the time, this would be more your field, but it's like the body is responding with fight or flight, increased cortisol, increased insulin, whatever the heck it's doing, and it's creating physical symptoms. So when we're trying to treat these physical symptoms only from the physical level, that's where we get limited. I'll let you expand on that, I guess.
And that was a big revelation I had when I spoke at one of the one-day retreats in April. I've been teaching on the nervous system, fight or flight, rest and digest, for years. Been studying Hawkins' work in the scale of consciousness for years now. Again, time and place, learning over time, repetition. I saw how they superimposed upon each other. And I was like, oh. So it gave another doorway for me to explain it on a physical, spiritual level or consciousness level. Because again, we always endeavor to try to meet people where they're at, what their current level of understanding is. If we dive into deep spiritual talk and they have no clue what we're talking about, there's no room to hear that. There's no openness to hear that. So I saw how the levels below 200 perfectly superimposed upon when our body's in fight or flight, when our body's in that state, the nervous system, how it's reacting, the hormones, how it's reacting. because that's not where we heal. And rest and digest, that's over 200. And yes, we have the broad range in the scale of consciousness, but even getting to the level of neutrality for even moments at a time, touching neutrality where there can be balance in the body so you can feel it in your nervous system and your hormones shifting, that's powerful, because most people have never even felt that level of neutrality in their body, again, most of their adult life. So when we see the scale of consciousness, it can be big and like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get to a state of unconditional love or joy? Yeah. That's not necessarily our goal. We can see that. That's another conversation. But to get to a place where your body can be well and heal, let's focus in on neutrality.
Yeah.
You always speak, obviously, the state of courage, the courage to, for those people on Sunday, to come to an event. Some people, I spoke to one woman this morning, and she was running a few minutes late. So it took courage for her to even like go into the auditorium because she was 5 minutes late, to go there, to find the location. She had never been in there. The lady who was on the table, she only got asked a few days before to be at that event as an artist and to bring her art. Mm-hmm. So the synchronicity, so the courage of people say, yeah, sure, I'll go and do that. That's a huge step.
Yeah. I think just as I was listening to talk, like the thing that comes to mind for me is like the most people in the world today are trapped in the Newtonian paradigm of like A causes B. And that's the way we see everything. And I think part of the reason why it gets so hard to explain all of this stuff is because in like the quantum field, you know, when you step into the spiritual realm, there is no more cause and effect, right? It's like if you had to put into cause and effect all of the factors that had to come into place for us to be in that room, for that woman to be on that table, it would, like, you could write an encyclopedia of all of the things that needed to happen. You know, like looking at my own personal story, it's like, you know, like my mom would have to die at 9 years old, and for me to become an entrepreneur, you know, and then I would have to get involved in the bar business and meet Andrew and buy Andrew out and get reconnected with Andrew. Then for us to reconnect and open up Lungo Vita, it's like just in Andrew and I's story alone, all of the things that needed to happen for us to be in that room together, it's insane, right? And you can't even put it into words. And then for it all to come together in like a 40-minute session where people, and that I like that you talked about like touching on neutrality. If you can touch the state of unconditional love or touch the state of peace for 10 seconds, it like will have a profound effect on your life. Like you'll have clarity that you have never had before in your entire life. And so I think that's part of the reason why, you know, Andrew's treatments, the treatments that you and I do, are so powerful, is because we're connecting to people at the spiritual level, and then we're bringing up things that have been repressed their whole entire life. And the second that comes into their awareness, it's like they experience this huge release, you know, and as they experience that release, the body moves into like this state of, you know, homeostasis, where it's just like balanced for once. It hasn't been balanced, you know, maybe since that traumatic event or whatever it may be. And for it to be balanced and to be in this complete state of relaxation, it's like insanely healing.
There's two things I want to talk about. One is even the wildness, because most people don't know this, but the church where your mom, and I know you know this, the church where your mom was a pastor, that church was founded by my great-great-great-great-great-grandparents.
Right.
My grandfather's name is on the cornerstone of that building. I run the Zoom at church on most Sundays, and the stained glass window with her name on it is right behind where I sit, where I actually sat for until I started doing Zoom. So any other time I was at church, the past ministers were behind me. I had no clue that one was your mom.
Yeah.
So when we meet each other and then we start learning about the story, and then your mom's been like, what? Like, what are the odds?
Yeah.
That my 5 great-grandparents were founding members of this church, and, you know, the church burned down and they rebuilt it, and it's changed like denominations over time. Mm-hmm. For that to be a space your mom was at and conditioning the space, and you spent so much time in your youth there, mm-hmm. for us to get connected 35 years later, how do you explain that? Like, how do you weave all those pieces together?
Yeah, you can't.
You can't. Yeah. So that's like where it's so important to be like, sit back, and where we're so humbled that we didn't put these things in motion. But it's like, okay, we're here for a reason. What is it?
Yeah. And that's where this idea of like surrender has to come in. You know, it's like when you just kind of, even as we just kind of lay out this nonlinear, you know, explanation, where we're trying to put it into a linear explanation, but it is all nonlinear. It's all happening in exactly the way it's supposed to happen. But you realize like how insignificant your plans are. You know, like you think like, oh, I had this plan. This is what I'm going to do. And like God, the energy of God, you know, is like, no. Like you don't even have a clue. But to get to that state of trust and surrender, you know, is like the ultimate goal, I believe, is to learn how to completely let go of control and to continue to shed all of the bullshit that you've taken on, you know, through your ego, so that you can reconnect and trust. And then when you move into that place of trust, you can fully surrender. And then you can basically just show up and be like, what do you want from me, God? Right? And then when you do things like that, you get to be a part of things like what we were a part of on Sunday. You know, that's like, they're just like showing up, no idea exactly what's going to happen. And, you know, even Andrew, when he gets up there, he's like, I don't really know what I'm going to do, but let's just go with it. And then it was like, it was so powerful. Yeah. And perfect. Yeah. It was perfect. Right. And so like, this is a state that I think, I know I'm continuously striving for. And I recognize along my ways that when I'm not surrendered to the will of God, and I start going down more of my will instead of thy will, is when I start to have more struggle, right? And so as I'm listening to this, for the average listener who's just starting to be exposed to spirituality and spiritual growth, you know, the idea of surrender, I think, is heavy. Like I'm supposed to give over to what? You know? And so I think I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, after doing this work for so long, and I am still in a state of where I'm like, I haven't surrendered that. I'm still trying to control that. And so it's not like this goal we have to get to, you know, but slowly over time, as you begin to give some things over and you start to see that it works out, you kind of start like stack wins, you know. It's like, it's with treatments. It's like the more treatments I do and the more pinpoint accurate they are, the more I'm like, okay, like I'm connected to all, right? And it's like God is working through me. And so if I just believe and trust that, then if someone shows up onto my table or shows up to one of my events, I'm just going to trust that that's going to happen, right? And I think that takes time, is like my interpretation, to build. It's like, it wasn't for me like a divine flash where I had a near-death experience and I saw it all. It's like I've had to like kind of build that knowingness and that trust over time. And I feel the more that I put myself out there to do thy will, the more that I'm surrendering, essentially. The more opportunities I'm having to say, okay, I see where I'm still. Like a perfect example of this is with like the whole Lunga Vita thing. And I had this vision of the way I thought it was supposed to go. And like I had built it. I want to build a community and all this. And it was just like met with resistance. And I was like, okay, I'm not aligning with thy will. So I said, God, what do you want from me? And God was like, to show up and serve and don't worry about anything else. That was the response that I got. But everything in my being was like, no, right? Because like, if I do that,
I have this really good idea.
Yeah.
We should do this.
Yeah. And so like, that's me saying that I know better. And again, when I use the word God, it's just like the energy of God, the higher power of your understanding, whatever you want to call it, universe. And so I recognized that I was still holding on, right? And that was like, I'm going to say, I don't want to say it was one of the last things I got to let go of, but because I know that once I let go of that one, another one's going to pop up, because that's the way it works. But why don't you give me your idea of surrender? You know, just kind of putting you on the spot, or maybe some examples of surrender, because I think people get hung up on this, because when you're still trapped in ego mind, the last thing you want to do is give over. The ego wants to control everything, right? The ego believes it is you, it is the center of the universe. So it's like, but as you continue to do this work, you become less ego, right? And then more the higher self instead of the small self. And this kind of, it's not a battle, but it's this constant separation and moving to observer. So like, I don't know, I just want you to just expand on that, because I think it's like a good step.
Yeah, and it's a great example. Like I'm kind of in one of those phases right now where a contract I had been, last 2 years, some contract work that basically been paying my bills abruptly ended. And I have a tendency to overthink, or I'm in a very overthinking stage because it's all the things and the what ifs and what should I be doing. And thank goodness I am where I am and I know what I know, that to not make a move without knowing that this is the right thing, because it's very easy. And I'm literally in a day-to-day. I'm in it one day and I'm like, I am overthinking again. And I'll recognize, I just spent 2 hours Saturday night looking at LinkedIn. I'm like, well, maybe I should go get like a regular job for a period of time so that I have safety and security. That's one of my needs, is safety and security. So maybe I just go get a job for 3 to 6 months until I'm shown the next step. And then I can realize after how much overthinking that was. And then we have moments like Sunday where it's like, I'm not meant to be anywhere else but here. So the overthinkingness and the knowing that, and thank goodness we have groups like your group and a group with Andrew, that we have like a healing team. So we can come to each other for guidance, because it's important to recognize that often when we're in it, we're in fight or flight in some recognition. And then our ego also wants to not surrender to the idea that comes through, the message that comes through, because it has an idea. So I think it was Friday last week, I did my Course in Miracles reading, and then one of the intentions I do every morning is, God, what do you want me to do today? Right? I pray to be thy servant, an instrument of thy peace. I pray to know thy will for me and the energy to fulfill it. And in that second, my cat jumped up on my lap. And so we've been taught, and that intention comes from David Hawkins, is when you sit with that for a few minutes, there's going to be a lot of stuff and thoughts come through, potentially, maybe yes, maybe no. And the ones that you can identify as like, that was pure love, that's your guidance for the day. And so my cat jumped up on my lap, and it happened to fit perfectly, of course, with what I'd read in A Course in Miracles. I'm like, well, that's my guidance right now. Like, how clear? But the ego expects the guidance to look like something. It expects it to be, oh, make this phone call and you're going to have a sale, or make this phone call and that contract that you're waiting on is going to get presented today. No, my guidance was to be totally present in that moment and love on my cat. And that's what I needed in that moment. So the ego, it's going to block a lot of that stuff that comes through. So that's where it's helpful to have peers who get and are doing similar work, because we will all lovingly tell each other when we're full of shit and give you the insights that you need to hear. And then you can sit and ponder them like, oh, okay, yeah, where does that fit?
Yeah, and I think I think you touched upon such a great thing, is like the ego is so proficient at protecting us, right? And so we will probably most likely not even recognize it unless we've created awareness around it, that it is doing so, right? Like, I was completely oblivious to the fact that I was controlling when it came to the creation of my retreats and my programs out at Longo Vita. Like, I didn't even realize it until I was in group. And I don't, this is in my Thursday night group, and someone said like you're way too close to this. You're trying to control everything. And I was like, I'm like, oh, that's it, right? Like I am like too in it. It's like, I haven't surrendered this over. I have all of these ideas, and I'm attached to the outcomes of all of it, right? And so when I finally did recognize all of that, and once you start doing the work, the let it go of it happens pretty quickly. Like, you don't have to sit in this big long meditation to let go of things. You could just recognize and go, oh, like one of the things I recognized was I was like in failure, in the pain of failure. Like, after one of the retreats, the retreat was phenomenal, but then I had offered them to come to join my community, and which sounds like a cult, but it's not. But I offered them to join the community, and then no one signed up, and I was just like driving home, and I was just in failure. And then I recognized, I'm like, oh, I'm in the pain of failure right now, and my mind is trying to pull me out of it with like what I can do next to not feel that failure ever again. And I'm like, no, I just got to feel this failure, right? And I just leaned into it. And it's like, once I recognized the mind was trying to protect me, and I leaned into the pain of failure, I realized what I realized over and over again is that the pain that I was avoiding wasn't that painful. It's like, I heard a quote recently that's like, pain's a mile wide and an inch deep. And it's just like, it feels so big. And that's what the ego thinks, that this pain is so, that we have to do everything in our power to make sure that we don't go there. I was actually just describing this with a client. It's like, if you think of a kid learning how to swim, most of the fear and resistance that they have to going in the pool is before they go into the pool. Like, you have to fight with them and coax them and do everything. And then once they get in the pool, they realize, oh, I can stand. It's just shallow pool. I can stand. Then they start having fun and playing and whatever else. But it's all of the resistance leading up to going in the pool. So for me, the fear was the pool. All the resistance and the overthinking that I was having was the resistance was me going into the pool. Then once I noticed that resistance, I could say, okay, I'm going to go lean into the fear or the pain of failure. And once I did that, I was like, oh, this isn't even that bad. Like, it was gone in a matter of seconds. And then when that happened, I created clarity, because now my mind is not racing to try and figure out how I don't experience pain anymore, because I just experienced the pain and it wasn't that bad. So then now the mind doesn't have to protect me anymore. And so then I'm sitting there and the guidance was clear. It was like, just keep doing what you're doing. It's like, it's going to work out. It's like, if you just keep showing up and helping people, eventually you're going to have all the demand that you've ever needed. And it was just so clear to me that I just got to keep doing it, and that I would have never made that awareness without this work, And so when people, because it's so broad, that's one of the things I've had a lot of trouble with in like the work that I do, is like really narrowing it. Like, I think I would be like insanely rich right now if I was like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to make $100,000 a year. Pay me 10 grand. I guarantee you make 100 grand by the end of the year working with me. I think I could I know I could actually do that, because I've done it for people. And so I think that would be a really easy sell, because it's so simple and tangible. But what happened on Sunday is so intangible. While you felt it, you felt movement, and I know that people's lives are transformed because of the non-linear nature of it all. It's like, how do you explain that? You can't even explain it to somebody, right? They just have to experience it. And even once they experience it, they may still not even understand what exactly happened. So that's kind of like the conundrum that we get into. But again, I just have to continue to go into this place of surrender, which is like, just keep showing up. Just keep putting yourself out there to help other people, and the rest will be solved for us.
I definitely experienced the same challenge, and we've talked about this when we're talking about the one-day retreats. Is all the business coaches will be like, oh, hey, what's the outcome? Who's your niche? What are you talking to? And it's like, we firmly believe, like, I can help anyone who comes to me, because I have that intention. I've had that intention for years. God, send me the people you can help. So when someone comes before me, I know there's something I can do to help this person. And maybe they come to me because their initial goal is to lose 20 pounds, but how I actually help that person might be something completely different beyond that. And so for Sunday or a one-day retreat, we know enough now to not say we're going to do 1, 2, 3. And these things are going to happen, because we know, again, what the fuck do we know? We know enough. We've accepted that I know this much. Like, I know this much of what's going to happen. And we show up with the intention to serve and do the utmost. And though who's there at that event that day, that will vary, right? If I host a retreat and there's 6 people, the next weekend I could have the basically same outline, different 6 people. It'll be a totally different retreat.
Yep.
Even though, yes, some of the talking points will be the same, because there's some foundation stuff we definitely want to cover and include, but we have some flex room, right? When I hosted a one-day last month, the day before, the universe hit me with you need to rest today. And I got very clear, and I realized like what I was going through that day, and like what I needed to do for myself was going to be very pivotal for these people the next day. And so the process of the people who are coming already started beforehand. Like, I was getting the information, who was coming, what did they need, what were we going to include in the retreat or not. And I had my running list. And during the day of the retreat, some things happened that, again, I had not put in the playbook at all. Yeah. Right. But it was in the moment I was open to receive the message of like, this is what is needed right now. These are what these people need right now. And that's so important, to be surrendered in that moment and with the right integrity, which is, you touched on the subject earlier of like what's happening in the broader spiritual community, is that be careful the healers you work with, because not everyone has that integrity. Again, there's nothing special about David I.
Right.
There's nothing special. Like, I grew up in Ruthven and Cottam, Ontario. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing special. But because we do the work ongoing, we're humble enough to know that we don't know it all, and that I'm going to lean on other people, try to not rush, and I try to do the best I can, right? That's all I can do in the day, is try to do the best I can, get clear. And that really does help mitigate stress. Because then whether it's overthinking or something else, those things are going to pop up, but it really does help mitigate the stress day to day. So I can go through present for myself, present for my clients, present for my kid, present for the cat, present for the cashier at the grocery store. Because when we see each other soul to soul, it doesn't matter that it was someone who came to me for counsel, someone who booked an official appointment with me.
Right.
That person at the grocery store, that clerk at the grocery store, she deserves, or he deserves, that attention just as much as anyone else. And that was what we saw on Sunday. So I don't think we explained it yet. So after the main session with the one woman on the table, Andrew instructed everyone to get up quietly, quickly. We had 2 minutes. Pair up with someone you don't know. So I was kind of making sure everyone had a partner, and it was weirdly smooth, because usually things like that, it's like herding cats.
Yeah.
It was, everyone got up, it was silent, and there was one woman left who did not have a partner. So it was like very clearly eye contact. Okay, you come with me. So I partnered up with her. He had us look into the person's eyes, hold hands, close your eyes. This was a minute. And then when we were opened our eyes, we were invited to embrace if we felt comfortable. And I felt when everyone opened their eyes, when I was like scanning the room, I could see the wonder in everyone's eyes.
Yeah.
Of, wow, what was that?
Yeah.
I spoke to one woman this morning who was at the event, and I asked her what her takeaway was from that. Like, what was her experience with it? She said she was partnered with a gentleman who she didn't know, obviously. She's like, I could just tell by looking into his eyes, he's such a sweet man. She's like, I welled up with tears. And she felt calm and peace. And so in that moment, here's a complete stranger. She took 1 minute, looked into that person's eyes, connected with the soul, and they both felt peace in that moment. Why aren't we doing that every day?
Yeah. Yeah. What was that worth?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like priceless, you know? And so like, and yeah, like, and I think what we're kind of doing here is we're giving a little bit of a rundown of like what happens when you kind of dedicate your life to this. You know, like Buddha said, it's like, rare is it for a person to even hear of enlightenment, and rarer is it still for someone to pursue enlightenment as like a life goal kind of thing. And it's like, not even that we have to have that as a life goal, but the path, if you just want to walk the path towards enlightenment, the revelations and the transformation that you're going to experience is going to be so profound. Not only is it going to transform your life, but like it's going to transform so many people around you. Just, you don't have to teach them anything. Just by who you have become, they are going to level up with you, right? And like, even just as I listen to you talk, it's like so many points came into my mind that I forgot most of them. But like one of the ones is like, you said, I followed my guidance that I needed rest that day. It's like, how many people are sitting and actually listening to their body, you know, and saying, hey, today's a day to need rest. And they're going, well, I can't rest. I got this, and this to say. No, all that waits because I was guided today, you know, by God, by the energy of the universe to take a break. And because of that clarity, you are able to show up and serve people at a deeper level, right? And so most people just aren't doing that because they're not even creating the space for that clarity to come through, and they don't even know what that clarity looks like, right? And so when you first kind of starting out, it's like it's easy to get wrapped up in the sound bowls and the incense and all that stuff. And I think there's a place for all of that in spirituality, but a lot of that becomes like just another thing to add to your life to try and make your life better by adding something out there. The work that we're talking about is about removing who we think we are so that we can connect to like source power as much as possible. Because when you do that, that's when the divine messaging comes through, and then that's when the impossible becomes possible, and we experience like miracles like we kind of did on Sunday, right? And so it's like if you can spend 1 minute, just seeing somebody for who they truly are, which is, who we really are at our core is unconditional love, right? And to experience that for 1 minute is like, oh, talk about like regulating your nervous system.
Yeah, you can have all the crystals you want, but if you don't have self-love.
Exactly, right? And so that's what I kind of think is like, because the person that I feel that listens to this podcast is a person who is kind of dipping their toe into spirituality. Because my podcast originally was like about like making more money and being more successful, which all of that comes when you do this work as well. But now I've just dedicated it to like what's the path to enlightenment? Like what do we got to do? And so I feel that people that listen to this podcast are people that are like dipping their toe. They're starting to expose themselves, and maybe they've had a mystical experience where they've gotten on a table, and had like a profound experience with some sort of healer, or maybe they got clarity that they've never tuned into before. But the reason I'm framing that up is like, well, where do you start? Like where would you start if you were starting all over again? Because this has kind of been a long reaching journey.
It's a can of worms, but the simplest way to start is gratitude. So if I had to break it down, it depends on the person, right? So it depends, and this is the role of a good mentor or coach, is to meet you where you're at, what makes sense for you right now, what are you willing to do? Gratitude to me is a non-negotiable. And whether someone is on a healing path or not, I have people doing my weight loss program, I give them a gratitude journal because I want them to do it. Not everyone's going to use it. That's okay. I gave them the tool that I know if they actually use it for 90 days, they will have insights and ahas. And then they will start to miss it when they're not doing it.
Yeah.
So gratitude is one. I also find the forgiveness prayer is very powerful. And if I had to give someone like a tangible, knowing what I know now, start A Course in Miracles.
Yeah. I would say Course in Miracles is too advanced for the new student. But I believe though, like even things we said in this podcast will be seeds for people, even if it went in one ear and out the other. Like I could read Hawkins' books, and it's like sometimes after I get to a certain point, it's like I'm reading it for the first time again, because the shit that he said in chapters in the higher states of consciousness chapters, I didn't even understand it the first time. But then I'm like, when I read it the second time, I'm seeing it differently. So I think A Course in Miracles is like that. I think if you read Course in Miracles, you do it the first time, you may have complete zero understanding of what is actually happening, but things are happening.
Right.
And so, but I think because you don't understand what's happening, I think people get like, it's hard to complete. I know the first time I did it, it took me like 2 years to complete it.
And it's similar to a gratitude practice, right? Gratitude is a little more tangible because someone can, and we can do a guided meditation and people can get the essence of gratitude. And similar with Course in Miracles is, again, as a mentor, it's like, you're not going to get anything, but if you do a lesson every day for 90 days.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think Hawkins, it was like not 90 or 100 lessons. It was one of those that was very profound.
Yep.
So I know, and again, knowing, I can't say I got it the first time because I've done those first 90 to 100 lessons probably at least 3 times. And each time is like, did I read this before? Because I know I read this, but I don't remember this at all.
Yeah.
So to start, for someone who's like, I know I need to do what it takes. Yeah, you're not going to understand it. It's like, I want to learn Japanese. Go to a Japanese class. You're not going to understand anything the first day. Keep going for 90 days.
Yeah. I would say that one of my big ones, I would have 2 major ones. The first is integrity. Like, as I think is you have to make a commitment to live your life like, and be integrous. Like you don't tell lies. You don't give the nod of approval to other people that are doing shady things. Like you just become a person who is truthful. And that is also like speaking your truth to other people, even when you think it's going to hurt them. You perceive that it's going to hurt them. And when you do that, I think one thing that happens is that you start to feel like you're a good person. And if you start to feel like you're a good person, then you feel like you're deserving of good things. And then good things begin to flow into your life. Gratitude was also a game changer for me as well. It's like, I say at my retreats is that I no longer write out gratitude because I am the state of gratitude. I don't have to write out gratitude. I'm in the state of gratitude at all moments. And that was because I started with writing out gratitude. But there was a moment when I was doing that when I turned gratitude on inside of me and I couldn't turn it off, right? I even joke about it. It's like sometimes it's annoying. It's just like I'm just grateful at all times, right? And so, and then the other big awareness that I think people need to come into is the idea and concept of what ego really is. Like, ego is essentially just our mind, and it's our sense of I. And just to see how the ego is protecting us, I think if you start to see that, then that is a great doorway or catalyst to start to understand what it's protecting us from. And then when we start to learn what it's protecting us from, that is the stuff that we have to learn how to let go of. And as you let go of all of that stuff, the ego no longer has to put so much effort into protecting you from it, because you no longer are fearful of that pain anymore.
Another thing that's critical is having a mentor, devoting yourself to the idea of mentorship. And that might be a new idea, a new concept for some people. But everything Dave and I have talked about, like, this is not an overnight process. And there are hurdles all around the way. There are roadblocks. And we need someone else to help see the road ahead of us, someone who can see into our soul, right? We've chosen to connect with someone, say, I've chosen for you to be the one to witness my soul and help me on the path that is ahead of me that I maybe can't see right now.
Yeah, I think even just having the willingness to recognize that you don't know it all. I think a lot of people have resistance to getting a mentor because they believe they have all the answers at some level, I can figure it out on my own kind of thing. I don't need to pay this money for mentorship or whatever that may be. But, it's been my experience with every mentor or coach that I've ever had is that I always make like 10 times the amount of money I make by signing up with them kind of thing. So if the money's the hurdle, I would just say, just do it anyways, because it's so worth it. But the other thing about in spiritual growth is whether you have a mentor or not, I think it's critical to have one. You and I both have Andrew as our mentor, but is that this thing is continuous. This is lifelong. And that is another probably hurdle as like a spiritual mentor, is that people don't want to sign on for lifelong coaching, right? And so people like these short little windows, but this thing is really lifelong. And that's why I've created groups and stuff that are, we're creating a community that is like very affordable, where you don't even notice the payment. But it's like asking the questions like, how long do you want to have guardian angels like by your side? Like, it's like forever. It's like, how long do you want to have someone that can see you at a soul level and see right through all of the bullshit, and get right to the root of what it is that you need to hear in that moment to transcend. It's like, you want that forever in your life. It's not like something you do for a year and then stop. It's like you do it continuously. Now, maybe you switch mentors or whatever that may be, but you need to have some sort of continuous guide, because you just get there quicker. Like you just get there way faster. It's like you can consume all the free content you want on the internet, but until you actually say, I'm making this commitment to grow spiritually, and I've, aligned with this person that I think is the person that's going to guide me there, that's when the real shifts begin.
There is so much what I call entertainment in the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
When I look at 99% of the stuff online, 98, 99, especially Instagram, it's all just freaking entertainment.
Yeah.
And that irks me so bad.
Yeah. And I think that's where we get into like the crystals and the essential oils and stuff like that. It's like, as well, it becomes like some sort of spiritual entertainment as well. It's like, it's a spiritual festival to go to, and, buy spiritual things. And, it's like, the thing about this is like spiritual work is sometimes like some deep, dark shit, and it's like about facing your shadow and coming to terms with the lies you've told yourself your whole entire life. And so it's not all this like rainbows and sunshine, and you have to get to the root of this stuff, and sometimes that's painful. So yeah, you have to watch out for that spiritual entertainment for sure. But yeah, and that's why we've created what we've created out of Lungo Vita. Like Lungo Vita was created to do this work. Like, yes, we have glamping, and that was always the model, was it's glamping, and then eventually it will become wellness. And like now that the glamping portion is built and we're still building, but we're moving more and more into wellness. And that's why Natalie and I have teamed up, and we started hosting these one-day events to kind of be what this is like an introduction. It's like to show you, to have you experience, these fields, have you dip your toe into like what is actually possible. And from there, we are also going to be hosting 4-day events. We have 4-day events coming up in 2024. And that's when you really, really get to step into the field. Like if you come to a 1-day, you're going to experience a major transformation. I mean, pretty much every single person that's come to our 1-days has had like a profound experience. But when you step into the field for 4 days, something happens. Well, I did my 5-day event, and by the end of those 5 days, those people were like floating around the property of Lungo Vita. They were just in a complete state of awe of the transformation that they were having. And so this is what's possible. But the 1-days are designed to kind of like be like, hey, this is what a 4-day might look like. So you got a couple of 1-days coming up. I got a couple of 1-days coming up in December or in January, December. I can't remember all the days. If you just go to Lungo Vita. But your main one coming up, the first one, the dates of that one, the self-love, the 4-day.
The 4-day is in February.
In February. Yeah.
The 4-day.
And it's about self-love.
You don't love yourself.
Yeah. That one's going to be amazing. And yeah, Natalie and I are pretty much teaming up in all of these, and they're going to be amazing events. So if you want to learn more about those events, I don't even think the 4-days up on the website yet. It will be soon. But the 1-days are, and you can come to those 1-days. They're really affordable. And if you're interested from there, you can talk to us about 4 days. But yeah, this is the work. And like I say, even if you come to a whole entire 4-day and you experience 1 minute of peace, it'd be enough to transform your whole entire life, right? So this is the power of like doing this work. So anyways, Natalie, always good to talk to you. We're gonna do more of these, and we're gonna go even deeper for people that are like really ready to go down the rabbit hole. So I'm feeling. I like it. Thanks again.
Thanks
Thanks for listening, guys. And don't forget, if you haven't already, just make sure you hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you again next week.